So, brother, we just had on Josh Trent of Wellness Force Podcast, Wellness Force Media. He's a breathwork coach. He's someone you would consider to be a mentor, someone who's guided you through some difficult times. I really didn't know a lot about Josh until you mentioned him to me. But that last hour, this past hour, the hour the audience is about to experience was tremendous.
That was powerful. I mean, we touched upon everything. I mean, really everything, from what it means to be a father, what it means to be a strong man, what it means to be vulnerable, how to breathe, how to broach uncomfortable conversations, how to attack your shadow self, that part of you that you don't want to look into, that you've never tapped into.
Yep. And as we went on this journey, each one of us got really emotional at one specific point during the interview. And as the audience knows, we don't script questions. What we'll do traditionally is I'll write down a couple different things in a journal. Like, okay, we'll talk about, his family situation growing up. We'll talk about uncomfortable conversations, how you define masculinity, a little bit about breath work. And then we talk. And we just talk and talk, and as things come up, we went down this journey where Josh started talking about ways that men buffer, and when there's these difficult things that are going on in our lives, we turn to pornography, to women, to alcohol, to drugs, to whatever it is to fill this void. And there was a spot where I was like, holy shit, I felt it so deeply.
Yeah.
Like that was me for a decade, maybe more, and I was trying to hide from what was underneath the surface that I didn't want to deal with.
Yeah. And that's the scary part about it, is when you yourself don't want to know what's behind that curtain. You don't want to look behind it because you're scared that since you don't know, the unknown is very scary, and you'd rather be in this, like, even this discomfort that you're currently living in, because you know what it is. And that's the thing that's kind of frightening. And it was just, man, that was really powerful. That was really powerful stuff. And I'm just thinking, like, how much we don't do that, and how much we project onto other people with things that are going on in our lives, and we put it on others because we haven't done the work and looked inward. And it's hard to cultivate long-term, meaningful relationships when you haven't taken the time for yourself to be like, who the hell am I? Who do I want to be? And what's holding me back from being that person that I want to be? What are these limiting beliefs I've been telling myself my whole life?
And Josh gives the Building Men audience, if you're interested in his breathwork program, after you listen to this episode, he'll give you 20% off if you sign up for his program. There will be links to visit the site below. It's the promo code is Building Men, so definitely look into that. And so we're going to call this, if I can breathe, I can choose.
Yeah, because that's like his motto, and that's how he ends his breath work. And I can confidently say that it is 100% worth it to get into this breathwork program. Like I spoke about in the episode, it eases you into it and makes it gives you small steps that you could build on and do and I do breathwork now every single day because Josh showed me this program, and I started out with him. And so it was amazing. It changed my life completely. It changed my conversations, my relationships, how I speak to myself and others.
So here comes the podcast. Strap it in and
strap it up.
Which is why I focus so much on breathwork, not for our global community only, but for myself. I mean, it's written on my arm in Italian, se posso respirare, posso scegliere, which in Italian means, if I can breathe, I can choose. Because if I take a breath, then my child is going to take a breath. And when I take a breath, I can feel my trigger, feel my anger. And then I'm going to be able to say, hey, listen, like, Daddy wants you to do this right now because let me explain to you what happens. On one side, we have this situation, and these are all the things that can happen on that side. On this other side, this is the situation, and these are things that can happen on that side. What do you think you should do right now? And literally let them answer instead of me being like, go do this. I mean, there's no room for curiosity there. He's not playing a game. I've taken the fucking game out of his life because I'm too lazy to be an explaining parent.
Let's get ready to get ready. brand new intro. I was listening to Michael Buffer. He was doing an announcement for something, and I was like, how cool would it be to do a little Michael Buffer to start with? What do you think?
I'm gonna switch to me now. There we go. I didn't expect that. That was going to be your intro. You were planning that the whole time.
I was planning it the whole time.
You were literally
brother.
Shitting on how you introed it, and this is the one that you went with.
That's what I went with.
That's awesome.
Welcome everyone to the Building Men podcast. Become the strongest version of yourself mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. Before we bring our guest on, we're really excited to have our guest on today. He shares the same space that we do in really helping people become this, stronger version of ourselves. Before we do, we had our first big day as Building Men, like our Building Men
coming out moment.
Coming out party today. We were actually working in a school district today, and we did a professional development seminar around the importance of mentoring and the importance of mentoring young people, but young men in particular. Was our first Building Men, LLC moment as a group, and in the short history of Building Men. I just wanted to congratulate you for your nice work today. It was really cool seeing you as my younger brother in this space leading people. So
yeah, who the hell would have thought that I would have been next to you in a classroom talking to a group of people about a podcast that you created, a movement that you created. It was really powerful.
Yeah, it was a cool moment. So I just wanted to take the opportunity just to appreciate you and all the work that you put in.
And I feel like I looked better than you. I don't know if I felt like I had this sort of air about me.
Yeah, you looked really good.
I look good.
14 years,
You're goddamn right.
So speaking of looking better, who I believe right now looks better than you, I'm going to bring on our guest right now. And so our guest is Josh Trent. He is the CEO of Wellness Force, and he hosts the Wellness Force podcast. So Josh Trent, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Guys, thank you for having me here. I liked your intro. That was cool.
We switch it up every single time. We switch up the intro, and I like to keep Anthony on his toes as we do the intro. But speaking of good looking, your hair, man, what's the product that you're using in your hair right now?
Well, this product I actually don't know the name of because my hairstylist keeps it on VIP status only, so I'm unfortunately not able to share.
So maybe down the road you can give us like a sneak peek into it. Maybe we could get like a private.
I don't know. It's the stuff he gave me. I don't pay attention to names, but dude, I'm due for a cut. Like it's get the volume, but also look, I'm gonna shake what my mama gave me.
Damn right.
I'm gonna use what I got.
You got to do that. And here's the other thing. You just posted your Halloween costume. You were Fred Flintstone,
yes.
Right? And the hair fitted.
It was
with the Fred
perfect.
Flintstone.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was going to dye it black, but at the same time, like, I got to be a little bit true to my roots. Mm. I'm not really a huge Halloween person, but this year, man, it was special. Like, I got to dress up my son, and my partner, Carrie and Shell, and we had such a blast, like, walking around the neighborhood. Like, it was great. I really enjoyed it. I'm not like a big holiday person, but that was super cool.
So I'll jump right into the whole, fatherhood thing, right? On Building Men, we love to talk about people's journeys in their own development and what really helps them understand what masculinity means. So I'll just start with, how has your definition of masculinity changed? I'm just going to jump right into it since becoming a father, if at all.
Well, massively. I've heard this phrase like the extra mile is lonely, or it's always lonelier on the extra mile. And I feel like being a father is an extra mile of an extra mile. The level of patience, the level of presence, the level of curiosity and the desire for learning what I don't know, it's been 10x'd, maybe even 20x'd at times. And so that's the biggest change for me is I think when you have a child, there's a part of your heart that gets hollowed out, almost like like a rock hound or like a miner hollowing out a cave to find gems. That's what happens when you have a child in your heart chakra, is that there's a part of your heart that you didn't even know was so deep. And then you have to have the patience and the presence to fill that heart in the relationship with your child. And
you're, now as a father, understanding that you lived life one for yourself and then for your partner, but now there's this other piece of you that you feel this responsibility for. You're able to see the world in a different way. It sounds so cliche to think about it, but once you actually experience it as, you are now responsible for this other life. I'd love to talk to you about your ideas around development with kids. As a I'm a former educator, my brother a former educator himself. There's so much around how we develop as human beings between in the beginning of our life, between the ages of 0 and 7 years old. So what are certain things, as you're thinking about that, developmentally what your son needs? How do you meld that in with what you need to do for him as a father now as well?
Yeah, I think on one side of the stadium there's curiosity, and I think on the other side of the stadium there's safety. And those two things get misconstrued because we find ourselves as parents, or I guess you could say as educators of any kind, either being in the middle of those two or going so hardcore to one side that the other is completely deleted. And so I feel like to really educate a child and to really be a loving, powerful parent, especially a father. I mean, I don't know the first thing about being a mother, but I have such a deep respect for what women go through in birth and being a mother. I mean, my lady works. It is like, whoa. Like, I work with my business and I work a lot, but I read a research report recently and it was like a woman that's a stay-at-home mom, they have 2.5 jobs, and it's no joke. And I think we can cuss on your show. I'm sure we can, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, holy fuck. The amount of work that women do. So the answer to your question is, like, whether you're a mother or a father, I'll speak as a father, we have to be able to constantly be the guardian of respecting both sides of the stadium and be like, okay, I totally understand my child needs safety right now, but also they need curiosity and play. And so there's a constant moving target in the middle of safety and curiosity that we have ownership of being a guardian for. And it's not always an easy thing to explain. Like, an example might be, if my child is old enough to go play out in the street, I have to really be willing to teach him about cars, and to teach him about gravity and do my best, do my absolute best to share with him, to really teach him instead of enforce rigidity or enforce boundaries. Yes, sometimes I'm going to enforce boundaries when he ignores or she ignores the lesson. If I have a daughter, I have a son now. When he ignores the lessons that I teach him, of course, I will have to step in as an arbiter and as an educator and be like, okay, this is why it happened. Or if it's something so severe to his safety, then yes, of course, I have to jump over to the safety side of the stadium and be like, okay, I'm taking control here and curiosity's out the window. I don't need him to know what it feels like to get hit by a car. So there's this, and that's a physical representation, but emotionally it's the same thing. This right here that I'm holding up, this phone is the biggest attack at a child's mind we will ever see in our lifetime. Period. End of story, man. Because the phone and my son is 4 months old. When I'm on my phone around him, he goes like this. He just stares at the phone. That's all. His limbic system is lighting up. He's getting all this dopamine and serotonin reward. It is really fucking serious how much we have to guard our children against the phone. Not only from a perspective of being wired to give these technology companies all their money, all their attention, all their life force, but also for the advent of 24/7, 365 access to internet pornography. And 24/7, 365 access to constant fucking novelty that has never existed. This is what people don't get. It has never existed, ever. Our generation, and especially my sons, our generation is the first generation that has had to. I'm a digital native, and I'm also a non-digital native. I'm 1980 is my birthday, so like I'm straddling the line between the one generation and the other. So I got them both. I know what it was like to have a rotary phone in my house.
Yes.
Right. I also know what it's like to have this phone. So the demands of our ability to have the capacity for safety and curiosity for our children has never been more severe, because the underpinnings of this, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Google, all the big tech companies, they're in business to harvest our energy, to harvest your children's energy. And if we're blind to that, well, then that is idiocracy. I mean, that is complete and total fucking dismissal of what it means to be a steward and a shepherd of safety and curiosity for our children. So it's not just a physical thing. It's also an emotional and a mental thing. And also our kids need more spiritual connection as well. So there's a lot to unpack there, man.
And I feel like kind of piggybacking off what you're saying, we are the products, right, of all of these companies. Like, we are the reason why they stay afloat. It's because whatever, they get out of us, they're kind of taking everything from us, and that's what allows them to be so big. And as kids, as children, they're like sponges, right? So they just are taking in information. Their brain waves haven't even developed yet, and they're just like consuming from all over. And where they get this information from is so important. And that's why from 0 to 7, those ages, your parents should be the ones that you're getting love from and reflecting on and looking at for love and acceptance and understanding. And when you're getting it from your phone and from TV and from these big corporations that don't give a flying fuck about anything to do with you except you as the product. How can I squeeze as much shit out of you as humanly possible without giving a crap about your health, your, understanding, your development, nothing. And that's what's scary, is that when people have access to a phone at the ages of 3, which I've seen that before, 2 even, they already know how to use it. They know they're going on social media at that age. Mm-hmm. That's completely dictating where their life is going to go in the future.
Yeah. My behavior is way more powerful than my word, because whether my child's 3 months, 3 years, or 13, he is always going to be looking at what I do. So if I'm literally on my phone when my wife or my partner is trying to speak to me and connect with me, guess what he's going to model? I mean, you guys know this. One thing people don't know about me is I taught martial arts to youth for an entire year. And one thing that I learned when I was teaching martial arts, it was Taekwondo, is that kids really do well with positive encouragement. And the ultimate last resort should be discipline, right? Or pointing out what they're doing wrong. Time and time again, I have found when it comes to kids, if you actually make it a huge point to shower them with gratitude and praise when they do the right thing, and the right thing being whatever you deem is right as their parent or their teacher, kids, they have an internal locus of control where they want to please. Like, kids really do want to please, because it's how they validate their safety. When they're pleasing to the adult, they deem their environment more safe. So it's really up to us to be a conscious parent or a conscious educator and be like, hey, my son is doing something that's really triggering the fuck out of me right now. Okay, let me take a breath, which is why I focus so much on breath work, not for our global community only, but for myself. I mean, it's written on my arm in Italian, se posso respirare, posso scegliere, which in Italian means, if I can breathe, I can choose. Because if I take a breath, then my child is going to take a breath. And when I take a breath, I can feel my trigger, feel my anger. And then I'm going to be able to say, hey, listen, like, Daddy wants you to do this right now because let me explain to you what happens. On one side, we have this situation, and these are all the things that can happen on that side. On this other side, this is the situation, and these are things that can happen on that side. What do you think you should do right now? And literally let them answer instead of me being like, go do this. I mean, there's no room for curiosity there. He's not playing a game. I've taken the fucking game out of his life because I'm too lazy to be an explaining parent.
What you just did in that moment, you summed up our experience today talking about the importance of mentoring in young people's lives. And one of the things that we talked about, Josh, was we had the participants really look at mentors in history. People like Dumbledore and Mr. Miyagi and Mick with Rocky. I mean, we showed a clip of Mick and Rocky, and I broke down. I cry all the time, but it was one of those things. And what we talked to the educators about was, listen, it's important to give praise, but think about it on another level. The most successful mentors in history are those who will lead the student, the mentee, to find the answer themselves for whatever that will meet the need inside of them. So instead of praising, great job, awesome work, way to go, I say, ask them questions about how their effort made them feel. So now it's something that will become innate, that's transferable into other situations, not just to get the sticker, the cookie, the extra scoop of ice cream. Now it's like, I feel good about me because of this question that my mentor asked me. That's such a powerful parallel that you drew between parenting and mentors. We are our children's first mentors, and they will emulate our actions way more than they'll emulate what we say to them. They will do what they see us do with other people.
Oh, hell yes. And that includes all the ways that we're being unconscious too. Because if we don't do our work as men, specifically as fathers, we're going to pass that right on to our children. And there's many different fractals of where we can go here. So you guys feel free to cut me off if I'm going too woo-woo. But like, I'm going to go science and woo-woo. The reality of what you described right now is that, yes, children are listening to how we guide them, right? How we teach them, how we're Mr. Miyagi. But they're finally attuned to our way of being as well. Like, if you're a parent and you don't know how to breathe, and if you're really overweight, and if you're stressed all the time, the kid's going to think that's normal. The child will think that's just a way of being. The world's an unsafe place. I need to eat unhealthy food. I need to drink beer. I need to smoke weed. I need to do all these things because that's what the world is. I mean, the way I could describe it is this. You guys know on a ranch, when they brand a cow, they like singe the cow with like the ranch letters. That is exactly what happens to the neuroplasticity in our brain from conception to 7. And also there's research that states from 7 to 13 there's some serious plasticity as well as there is for our whole life. But 0 to 7 is really special because we're essentially on drugs. Like a child's mind, the hemispheres, there's so many neurons, so much going on there that whatever they are presented with, and this includes horror films, pornography, critical race theory, just insanity that is being vomited onto children right now. We literally have to guard and protect them from all the negative imprinting they're receiving from society's coffers, which is really what's going on. Human beings are being monetized. So really the conversation we need to have here is like, in the degree that we are branding cattle with our letters of the ranch, our children are being imprinted. It's called the subconscious imprint. Our children are being subconsciously imprinted and branded with the beliefs and really the evilness, if we're not careful, of society that's really just training our children to feel like shit about themselves so they can be made money off of in the future. And that's what the fuck's really going on right now. So it's our loving responsibility to shield them from that to the best we can.
Before I jump into breath work, the fact that you said, if I can breathe, I can choose. And it was poetry when you said that. The Italian tattoo on your arm, we're gonna have to pull that off and just isolate just that clip of it because it was lovely. And I don't throw that word around too loosely, Josh. But it was lovely. I want to just before I missed the opportunity when you mentioned these kids, they have pornography at their fingertips 24/7.
Yeah.
I mean, shit. When we were growing up, they missed this thing where you had to go into the 7-Eleven or the one store that maybe had a Playboy or a Penthouse and then take it and put it inside of a Sports Illustrated and pretend that you're looking at another magazine when you're really looking at boobs. That's how we grew up.
And now you could pretty much go on there and right. you could literally have everything that you want, what you're feeling, the color, the body type, how many people are going to be involved with this porno that I'm going to watch with this. I mean, yeah. It's maddening.
It's even more deep than that. Now, when you look at the metaverse and fucking Facebook's insanity and what's happening in the 3D world, now people aren't going to want to take off the glasses. People are literally going to want to live in a fake world and have sex with fake people and exchange fake money for fake real estate and get completely filled in a hollow chamber with no bottom. That's really what we're looking at right here. And so we have to be militant about it. We really do. We have to fight for this shit.
And there's so much fear, right? And this is always the thing that I kind of have this argument with myself around is like, you look at mass media and their main agenda is fear, 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 right? Let's just make people feel as like you need to be reliant on us to provide you with the information. And usually it's, you're scared, so let me help you. Then on the other end, there's also the fear of that, right? Of media controlling and like, government taking over and like fear on both ends of that. So like, how do you find that light when it's so easy to fall into that darkness and that like fear-based understanding? And it just, especially in this day and age, it seems like it's really, you can easily fall into that trap.
It is a trap because we don't know it is, and that's why a bear gets its foot caught, right? So it's going and living its life. It's not aware of what's happening, and it steps in a trap. We step into traps too because we allow ourselves, especially as parents, content creators, like people like us that are a voice in the world, whether small, medium, or large. We, if we're not careful, can get pulled into conversations that are actually quite toxic and unhealthy. And the whole point of the conversation by the other side is to literally just try to smear or to delegitimize what we're saying. And so that's what we really have to be careful of, because a lot of times what I see, I just did it. For example, literally the podcast today earlier, I was interviewed by someone who identifies as hardcore left, like super duper duper progressive. Mm-hmm. And I put a post on Instagram and I was just like, nope, I don't comply. Like, fuck you. I actually don't comply to the mask wearing, to the vaccines, to the mandates, to the psychological warfare that's happening to us. Because that's not the price that I'm willing to pay, is my freedom, so that everyone else can have a perceived fake sense of safety, which doesn't exist anyway. So anyways, she commented on my post, and there was like hundreds and hundreds of comments because it was a very triggering post. And I understand why, because I'm trying to do my best to wake people up, because I'm just like you guys, like I'm a warrior. Like I'll be violent if necessary. If my son is out in the street, I'll be violent to protect him if somebody attacks him. Like, so it's the same thing with our freedom. Anyways, she commented on the post and she was like, I really want to understand what you're saying. And it was like this breath of fresh air, because here's someone on the quote other side, which I don't identify as right or conservative either. I think all this shit's completely ridiculous. I think it's really just divisive language that is meant to just further and further pull people away from each other. So I don't actually believe that a right and left exists. I think it's perpetuated by fucking media to continue to divide people. But anyways, we had this conversation and I shared with her what I'm about to share with you guys. And that is, love and protection sometimes is really necessary. Like sometimes violence is necessary and sometimes peacefulness is necessary. And we have to, from an observer's perspective, like not woo-woo and not pie in the sky, we literally have to be in an airplane of consciousness and zoom 30,000 feet above Earth and look at how we're treating each other, look at the conversations we're having, look at how we're showing up as men, because holy shit, the demands of men, and especially fathers, conscious parents, conscious men, conscious fathers. Wow. Like we really picked a challenging game to push play on here. You know, like we're coming in at probably one of the most challenging times it's ever been to be a conscious man or a conscious father. So, and I'm sure the women feel the same way. So we really have to be aware of all these things I'm sharing with you guys. And we have to get back into the art of conversation, to the art of listening to one another and not just trying to fucking cancel each other. I mean, it's just idiocracy.
The pendulum has swung so many times in the last couple of years from, you know, you hear toxic masculinity, and then men are so soft, you know, that they wouldn't be able to stand up if they needed to, or to, you know, to throw down if the chips were on the table. So what do you see as the biggest challenges facing men in this space that we're dealing with right now, that you feel like these are the top 2 or 3 things that we really need to get a hold on first?
We have to be aware that our software is being hijacked. That's the first thing. Our software as men operates very different than the feminine. So as men, the masculine energy is about completion. It's about closing the deal, getting shit done, chopping wood, carrying water. And not that the feminine doesn't do that too, because both of these energies exist in both women and men, or however you identify, right? It just exists. So, but I personally identify as a man who has a masculine core or a masculine essence. And that's not the case for all men. Some men, they operate more as a feminine core, and that's okay too. It's not about shaming them. But for people like myself, and actually even for the men that might identify with more of like a feminine core, they're still at times going to have to shift way into their uncomfortable masculine in order to have the energy of completion be fulfilled. What I mean is our software, literally how we have been trained, how we have grown, and how we have operated in this world. That software is about completion. It's about myopic singular task insertion. Men are very poor at multitasking. Women are very good at multitasking. There are core differences that we need to like put down the fucking weapons. Women and men need to drop their shields, drop their fucking swords, stop having this narrative about the war of the sexes, because it doesn't exist, by the way, unless we keep talking about it. The reason why our software has been hijacked is because men aim to please. We see a conflict, we see an issue, we want to solve it. Women are upset because women have really been violated and the feminine has really been treated like garbage for quite some time. And so we are feeling, as Eckhart Tolle talks about, the pain body that is still rippling with women. And so as men, guess what we do? We see a problem, we want to solve it. Well, guess what got hijacked? Now, men that identify as a masculine core, when they see the feminines experiencing the pain body and the discomfort of what's happened to them over the past 250 years, and even more severe before that, we soften so much that we actually remove ourselves from our masculine core to solve the problem of the feminine experiencing the pain body. And we fucking forget who we are. We completely delete our software. We're not really in service to the feminine, because guess what? As we soften so much and completely disassociate from our masculine core, she unconsciously resents us, because a woman wants a strong masculine man. And a strong masculine man has the capacity to go from feminine to masculine, right? Part of being a strong masculine man is knowing when to drop all that shit and just totally be in a feminine energy. But what's happening is you have Harry Styles wearing dresses. You have children that are being taught that it's perfectly healthy and normal to wear lipstick and dresses to school. And you have all this really forced, coercive gender dysphoria that is being stuffed down the mouths of children like a geese is fed for foie gras. And it makes me sick to my stomach, because I'm all about accepting people for who they are. But don't let your way of being be inflicted upon to cause harm onto my child or to my way of being. I don't force my way of life on you. So don't force your way of life on me or my children. And if you continue to push in this way, you're going to meet resistance. You're going to meet violence. I'm not saying I'm going to be violent, but I'm just saying we as men have to remember that part of our software is to be violent. And violence isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes violence is very loving. I mean, look at World War II and Holocaust. So we needed to be violent to protect against evil. And sometimes we have to go there. And I think we need a remembrance of that. I'm not saying we need to be violent. I'm just saying, like, we need a remembrance of who we are as men, and we need to be sacred fathers and sacred parents, where there's sacred anger, sacred love, sacred protection. All these things need to be embodied as men. We need to remember our software.
If someone right now is listening and they find themselves in the spot that you just referenced, that they feel like over the course of time they have softened up to a spot, trying to people please, trying to solve problems in a way that now they don't recognize their former self, what advice would you give to that man who's listening right now?
I would say start with a very deep and very curious and honest practice of breath work. That's my perspective based on my own life and the results I've received. Start there. After breath work, start getting really good with a journal, either analog or digital, and go through some of the emotional intelligence practices that I have in our wellness guide. You know, I give this guide out for free because I want to answer your question for free for people. I want to give them something they can actually use. And so part of the process in my M21 system is a bullet journaling about what are the things that are causing me the most pain. You know, be honest with yourself, because to the degree that we ignore our pain as men, we actually will sedate it, and we'll find food and alcohol and drugs and porn and sex addiction. We'll find all these things to really give ourselves the perceived sense of peace, but we've never had the courage or the awareness to stop and be like, okay, what's really bothering me? What am I really upset about? And I have a really simple practice I can share with you guys on how to do that. But essentially it starts with like taking a nice full deep belly breath. And a lot of people don't know how to do that, but there's a specific way you need to do it so that you reset your nervous system. And then on top of that, it's having the courage and the awareness to write down like, okay, there's a specific process I need to go through to figure out how I can be okay in myself, how I can feel courageous, and then I can bring that to my woman. But if we spend our time as men trying to please, that's us being in our feminine. That's us like trying to overly nurture our woman. Our woman doesn't want to be overly nurtured. Our woman wants to feel our power. Our woman wants to feel our capacity to be masculine and to have completion and to be feminine and to nurture. But just like I gave the analogy earlier with the stadium, where there's the safety, and then there's on the other side of the stadium, you have to have the curiosity. We have to have that in our relationships the same way. We have to provide our woman safety, but we also have to be curious about why she's upset. So we're all parenting each other, dudes. That's really what's going on here, and I think men can start there.
You very eloquently described how I lived my 30s. I'm 44 years old now. That was and going through just, a very dysfunctional marriage. That's how I showed up. That was how everything that you just said resonated with me so deeply. And now having seen the light and understood the mistakes that I made, that was, it was in unison with a, very abusive narcissistic relationship that I was involved in. But basically what happened was I went through that journey that you just described, Josh. The breath work is such an important part. I've mentioned a couple times in the podcast my work with Mark England, who is, the enlifted man. He's the vocabulary guru, just talking about the words that we use when we're speaking to ourselves. And one of the interesting journeys we've gone on, Josh, is talking about a story that we've been telling ourselves for a long period of time. And I have a specific story that I go back to when I was younger, and we walk through this story, and as I tell the story, I get choked up. I get emotional about it because my breath is in my chest and I'm reading this script right in front of my face. So I am in it so deeply. Once I'm able to slow the story down and then breathe deeply after every single sentence, I'm able to take myself out of that story. Now I'm reading words on a page. I am not living that bullshit that I was telling myself. So I'm fascinated about how you came into this knowledge around breathwork. What was the turning point for you when you were like, this is it, this is where I'm going to move forward in this direction in my life?
2014, I got the gift of being fired from a corporate job that I was committing spiritual suicide at. And in 2015, I started the podcast after a pretty deep, dark night of the soul. And I found plant medicine, ayahuasca specifically, and it was so jarring and also so provoking for my healing that I started exploring other modalities that weren't so severe to my psyche. And I came across breathwork in 2016 at an event called the Unbeatable Mind Retreat with Mark Divine. And at that retreat, I was on the floor and I was breathing, and I was with all these like special operations people, like pretty burly people. And I'm crying, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Why am I crying? Like, what is this? And I later found out that when you're doing proper breath work, especially cyclical breathing, you have a release which is called catharsis. And so I had a catharsis release, and it sparked my curiosity so much that I ended up doing, in 2017, on my 37th birthday, I did this event called the... I think it was called the 20X. So it was an overnight crucible with Mark Divine where you literally would take your body to such an insane place. You're doing the CrossFit workout Murph. So if people don't know what that is, it's like 300 air squats, 200 push-ups, and 100 pull-ups, and you're soaking wet, and drill instructors are screaming at you. So I had to take my body to a place that was so severe that a lot of times that's where spiritual awakening can happen, is when you're pushed so hard physically that all the bullshit, all the stories, all the default mode network evidence that you've gathered that life isn't safe, that your childhood was what messed you up, that it's other people's fault, all that shit melts away because you literally can only focus on your breath and your teammates. And that was like the crucible for me. And actually, that's when I got this tattoo. There was something that I started to trust about myself where I was like, okay, as long as I can breathe, I can choose. And I give homage because part of my heritage is Sicilian. My grandfather was 100% Sicilian. They came over from Termini and Maresi and hit the shores of New York. His parents did, my great grandparents. And so I can only imagine how much they had their breath taken away. Like, we don't realize as men that when we're traumatized and when we're not breathing, it literally, and this is what I found in my journeys and my travels, and also just in reflecting it here with you guys, when we are not breathing, we actually disconnect from our nervous system. It's like taking a socket out of a wall. like we unplug from our true experience when we're not breathing. And so like even right now, guaranteed everybody, if you just take one deep breath in through your nose, fill your belly, and then exhale through your mouth, watch how much different you feel. Now imagine if you responded to your wife after you did that instead of, because what's happening for me and for all of us that I've learned is that when we're not breathing and we actually hold our breath, we're disconnecting from ourself, from our heart, from who we are. And so when we breathe, we can choose, because it's only through breathing life and a reconnection to our nervous system that allows us to be ourselves. So I think and what I was dealing with specifically was I didn't love myself and I didn't believe in myself enough to lead a global movement. I didn't love myself enough. I didn't care about myself enough. I didn't believe in myself to host a podcast, to get millions of downloads. I didn't trust myself to do it because that was an imprint, as we talked about, a huge cattle brand to my psyche when I was a young dude. I was super overweight. I was bullied a lot. My dad left home early. My mom was manic bipolar. Like, I chose a pretty challenging game to push start on. But I did that for a reason, so that I can be an example, and an authentic example, by the way, which means that sometimes I'm going to fail in public. And a lot of leaders don't want to do that. A lot of men don't want to be seen as failures or as soft or making mistakes, because they might deem themselves to be weak. But I actually think vulnerability and making mistakes in public is the most ballsy shit. It's the most powerful shit. So the breath gives us all this awareness. The breath has given me all this awareness as well. And that's why I continue to go back to it.
The point about vulnerability, it's such a challenging spot for men to get to that point, Josh, where they're able to take the step over that threshold. You mentioned the word weakness. I think that's one of the biggest fears of men, the men that we work with, that fear of coming across as weak in whatever aspect in life. I think if you could boil it down to one of the biggest fears that men have, it's about the fear of being weak. But being weak and being vulnerable are not synonymous. I would say the contrary, that having the courage to be vulnerable is such a strength for men to realize and to recognize. I'll take your journey back when you said you went through this physical awakening and you started getting in shape. You lost a lot of weight, but the emotional work was the work that you still needed to do. You mentioned that on another podcast, that was the work that you need to do. So talk to us a little bit about what was it that sparked you to be like, you know what, I can't just live in this spot. I need to look at the tough shit, these dark corners of my soul, if I'm really going to make progress moving forward.
Sometimes I'll take a deep breath, and it's actually just because I want to give myself a moment to be honest with you guys, instead of just spout out some story or some canned response. What came up for me, what I experienced when you asked that question, was the sheer weight of a lack of forgiveness. Like the radical fucking weight of wearing a backpack with all the sins, all the people I've hurt, all the women I slept with, all the porn I watched, all the bullshit that we all carry as men, and fucking choosing to wear that backpack every day. I mean, it's exhausting. It's fucking exhausting. And when you're exhausted, you make poor choices, right? Look at any recovery program. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. It's the HALT acronym. Anyone in 12-step can tell you that. Those are the times when you have to be very vigilant about where you allow your thoughts to go and where you allow your behaviors to guide you. And so for me, what started to come up as I hosted more and more podcasts is not only did I not forgive other people, the most important thing is that I didn't fucking forgive myself. And that is a deep unconscious load for any human being, especially for a man to carry, because a lot of times we will. So my particular flavor, I guess you would say, would be women. Like, I was not a very conscious person in my 20s. with women. And so there was a lot of shame that I had to really face there, and shame is a lack of forgiveness, right? So when I have shame for oneself, I can't see that that was the level of consciousness that I had at that current time. And so what happens is, and there's many therapists that talk about this, is you actually, and I actually, we eroticize our pain, or we eroticize our unhealed wounds. And a lot of the porn that a lot of men are drawn to, and that unfortunately I fell into the trap of, was like shame-based porn, where a woman's like cheating on a man, or a man is being disrespected or whatever. And it was because, in retrospect, I was actually holding on to all the things that I had really mistreated women in a way that wasn't forgiven. I didn't have the awareness. I didn't have the courage to like really forgive myself. And so the path to forgiveness is acceptance. And I process that acceptance in ayahuasca ceremonies, in breath work, and a lot of different mediums, Vipassana meditation, float tanks. I mean, you name it, dude. Right. And so the best place to really start for me and for all of us is, if you have a big mission, if you have a big dream, you better be prepared for all of your shit to come up. And by all of your shit, I mean all of your judgment of self, judgment of others, all of your shame for self, and all of the ways you haven't forgiven yourself, which is essentially what shame is. And so that's really the load that I had to process. I had to sift through it. I mean, it reminds me of that scene in Shawshank Redemption, where Andy Dupre, I think was his name, he had to crawl through a river of shit to burst the pipe, and then finally he was redeemed. I mean, that's the soul's journey that some of us choose. And so that's the journey that I had to walk for myself, to actually forgive myself for all the things that I did from really being wounded, right? When I was young, I was overweight, and overweight guys don't get a lot of women's attention. And so I made the feminine wrong. And then of course I attracted a woman that reflected my beliefs, and so on and so forth. And so it's only from this place with a partner who, I really love and I'm so proud of, because she really knows how to call me on my shit. And I know how to call her on her shit. And we don't do it in a way where it's unloving. It's not like, and I'm not batting 1,000, but definitely there's a focus on conscious relating and conscious relationship. And she's held a lot of space for me when I've processed my shame. And I've held space for her when she's processed her stuff too. And so I think that's really what leading Wellness Force and having this journey of letting go of physical weight. Well, whenever you let go of physical weight, you're going to see behind the curtain that the Wizard of Oz was actually emotional weight the whole time. It wasn't about your fucking physical weight. Your physical weight was a manifestation of how you were unhappy, not loving yourself, not forgiving. And there's many tools to get us there. And and the last thing I'll say is, forgiveness is not a light switch. Self-love is not some light switch that you flick all of a sudden. And it's like, oh, I love myself today. No, if it was that easy, there'd be no game of life. It's simple, but it ain't easy to love yourself. And so in order to love yourself, there has to be a deep, deep, deep unpacking of all the ways you judge yourself, all the ways you haven't forgiven yourself. And there's many tools to bring that stuff up, right? And breath work is one of them.
Well, thank you for sharing that, first of all, because it's just such powerful stuff. And I know for me personally, I talked to my brother about you because I went through your whole Breathe program. That was the first time I've ever done intentional breath work before, right? I've heard of it, but I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, what am I doing? Like, I know how to breathe, right? I'm breathing every day. I'm alive, right? And so I did this. This is like at the start of the pandemic. Everything shut down, right? My job is lost because it was deemed as non-essential. And I basically didn't have a choice but to look inward, especially after going through a month and a half of just drinking and doing drugs or whatever I could to numb this feeling of like, I'm just partying, right? Then all of a sudden you don't have any other option but like, okay, who am I? Who am I really? Like, and a lot of people are scared to pull back those layers of who they are, because I don't even know if I'm going to love the person that's inside. This was the hardest part for me, is like, once I figure out who this person is, am I okay with that? Like, am I ready to take that on? And when I did your Breathe program, first of all, it's amazing because it's very intro and hold your hand the whole way through. That's what I liked about it, right? It doesn't come on really strong, right? I've done like Wim Hof, and I've done these other breathing programs, and all of them were very aggressive. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if I could do this. But yours kind of eases you into it. And the one thing that it allowed me to unpack was it gave me the space to look at myself for the first time through, like, you know, I was able to take the glass off and be like, who is this person really? And then what I noticed is every time that I would have some sort of moment in my life, the first thing that I would do is I would be closed off from the rest of my body, right? So it was from here up, I'm all up in my head, right? And everything else from lower down was shut down completely. And I stopped breathing. And once I started allowing myself to breathe, or even recognize when I was breathing, that's when I had clarity. And so I just want to thank you for that, because that was the first time in my life that I've had that, like, awareness of my breath and who I really am as a man, as a person, as a human being.
Man, I wanted to give you like a digital handshake and a digital hug, and just hold you and tap you for a minute and connect with you as a brother, because, dude, this is what, like I'm just washed with so much gratitude for you and your share. You know, I'm so grateful that you actually did the practice. You would be surprised, man, how many people purchase the program, because I get to see who goes through the program, right? I see the percentages of completion. Some people do one practice and they never do any more. And so for your ability to actually, like, do it, apply it, gather it, and then most importantly, embody it and get these lessons and start, like, bringing these lessons to your life and you know, your family, like, that makes me emotional, because that's the whole reason why I created the program, you know, is to get people back in touch with what the hell is going on down there. And by down there, I mean with ourselves. And so I feel like I'm super grateful. And, you know, I would love to be able to provide this training to your audience at a deep discount, if you guys are willing. Like, I think it's really important for us men to be able to understand, like, breath doesn't have to be woo-woo. It doesn't have to be weakness. It doesn't have to be like we're in a cave or we're on a hill, like with a flowy cape. I mean, this is practical, really, really solid practices for us to take inventory, you know, integrate things, and then be more loving, show up more powerfully. Like, that's why we're here. At least that's why the three of us are here.
I, as you were talking, Anthony, and as in response to your thought, Josh, you mentioned, you know, having these suitcases that are taking up space for you to truly get in touch with what's going on. As you were talking, I just had this moment where I started doing this dive into shit that was blocking me from doing the work, from really getting in touch with all the shit all the lies that I was telling myself about who I was based on who I thought other people thought I should be. And so one of the things for me was, and I'm going to try not to get emotional around this, as a father, what if I do that work and I pull back all this shit, right? And then I don't like who's behind it. That the person that's there, that exists behind this facade that I had built up for such a long time, what if I fucking hate this guy? And is that the guy that I want in front of my kids? So for me, it was so hard to really do that work and unpack all that shit, because I was really scared of what could be behind it, what was there behind all the shit that I had built up. So yeah,
it makes me emotional just listening to you.
Yeah.
So did you want to share more?
No, I finally gave myself the space, the permission to look. And what I recognized is that I did love that person. I did love him. He was hidden from the world for a long period of time. And, you know, my family told me for such a long time, I walked around in this way where they told me I looked like I was hungover, even though I wasn't. I just kind of had this slunky, sulky way about me that I wasn't me. And it was just safe. So I was in the safe spot, being scared of what was behind the curtain. Like you mentioned, the Wizard of Oz analogy. So once I was able to pull it back, I was like, I remember this dude, and he was fucking a badass. I like this guy. I'm going to fucking make sure that I honor him and do what he needs moving forward as well, to be the best dad that he could be for my kids. So it was, it was a journey, and I never really thought about it in that way until you just mentioned what you said. So I appreciate that.
Wow, man. Yeah. For me, what I was experiencing when you were sharing, like really sharing, was such a gift. I mean, that's the whole, we use these words, right? We have these phrases we use like, hey, thank you for sharing. But really sharing is when you're offering your gift. So dude, the way you just shared your gift and the emotion that I felt in you and the way that you just fucking went for it, I have to say two things. Who cares who's in the fucking shadow? First of all, because of how you just showed up. I mean, that's really you anyways. Your vulnerability and your ability to describe your true fear because you want to show up so much for the people you love. That itself extinguishes the fear. You know, that itself pours so much sunlight and so much, like you're wearing a shirt that says be the light, you know? And when you were just the light, and the way you did that, because I was experiencing everything I just told you, and I was also experiencing this one phrase, and it might seem harsh, but we all need to hear it. And it's like, so what? So what if you're afraid of what's behind there? Because it's behind there whether you see it or not. It's behind there whether you want to explore it or not. And this is like really the war that we perpetuate with ourselves. And that is, you know, are the thoughts that I'm thinking actually true? And then let's discover that. Or are the feelings that I'm feeling actually true? And let's discover that. Or is the awareness that I'm having actually true? And let's discover that. So, you know, there's the thoughts, there's the feelings, there's the awareness. I call it the BTFA. you have a belief, you have a thought, you have a feeling, and then you take your action. And it's typically in that order. I have a belief that in the dark corner of my closet, and as you so powerfully shared, like, I'm afraid of what's in there. Okay, well, that when I'm afraid of something, that gives me an emotion. Energy and motion is emotion. That gives me an emotion or a sense that I need to contract. I need to be afraid. And really right there, what that young man needs, what young Dennis, what young Josh, what we all need in that moment isn't more of a beatdown. We don't need to judge ourselves for feeling sad, for feeling compressed, for feeling scared. What that young dude needs is a fucking hug. And he needs to be presenced, and he needs to be parented. And that's the really hard work, because we are taught as men in this world that showing your feelings is weakness, get back out there, you pussy, and put some dirt on it. And all these things that we have just been force-fed, they actually block us from parenting our young man. And when you cut off access to your young man, and I'm not in any way taking away from your experience. I think your experience is absolutely inspirational in every single fucking way. What I'm saying is that along the journey that we all walk, and you just showed us, we have these moments of decision where our fear comes up, our inner young man's trying to talk to us. We either beat him down and tell him to shut up, or we do our breath work and we pause and we turn to him as a father of ourselves and we say, well, what are you here to teach me? What are you here to teach me? Because when we do that and we effectively parent the child inside of ourselves, I mean, it makes me fucking. We're gonna have to start crying on your podcast because I'm getting emotional right now too. I will never forget this moment, man. You are flashing me back to a moment that I had, and it was with my mentor Paul Chek, and I had this severely terrible experience that worked out in my favor. But I went to his home and he was working with me. And all this stuff came up for me around, like, how am I going to do it? Like, how am I going to be a good father? I want a family. How am I going to handle it? And I was just looping. And he grabs my shoulder and he looks at me and he says, well, who's doing it anyway? And I'll just pause there, because the severity of that, you might get it if you know what I'm talking about. Like, I'm doing it all. And so he said something so profound to me. He was like, Josh, when you have the courage and when you start really understanding that you need to do the deepest inner work you've ever done, because if what you're saying is true and you want a family and this is what you want, when you do the work and when you parent the child inside of yourself, the universe will put one in your arms. And like that right there, you know, I experience it right now just like I did at his home. because that's how Nova came to the world, was by me having that experience, right? And so by me doing the work to throw up my shame and deal with my shit, and by you so powerfully sharing that, like, you didn't want to go to the closet or the darkness because you were afraid of what was there. Well, it's fucking there for all of us anyways. So let's get on with it. You know, like, let's fucking get on with it so that we can start loving ourselves and really repatterning the way that we think about love. Because when our kids are making mistakes, or when our kids are scared, or if your child was scared, the last thing you would do is say, come on, you pussy, don't be scared. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? You would never say that to your child. What you would do is you would hold your child and you would say, it's okay, I'm going to protect you. I got you. Well, why don't we do that to our inner child as men? That's the big question we all need to ponder. So meditate on that.
And it's when you're a little kid and you see that, you know, there's that scary thing in the corner that looks like a monster and you're terrified of it. You go and you flip on the light switch and you realize it was the laundry that you didn't put away that day. And that's what we need to do. We need to understand that there's going to be that scary shit that's sitting there in the corner. But what we need to do is flip the light on and say, you know what? It's not fucking that bad. It was just some shit that I didn't deal with that I need to put away right now.
Yeah.
Josh Trent, can you one more time, can you go through the if I can breathe, I can choose? Can you say that in Italian? Soprasesti, lasagna, meatball. Can you one more time?
You're Italian. You sound
You're making me hungry for lasagna now, dude. I want some lasagna now.
Oh, yeah.
So it's se posso respirare, posso scegliere.
Love that.
So it's if I can breathe, I can choose. Because whenever I'm in fear, in so many ways that we all explored this today, like, when I don't breathe, I'm constricted. I'm stuck, right? When I'm stuck, I'm contracted and I'm in fear. My narrative when I'm in fear is either going to be to comfort myself or to make myself wrong and shame myself for being in fear. But you know what blasts all that shit to the ground? And like literally like the arm of God coming in, just being like, no, is when you go like this. 6 times in a row, actually. And then once you do that, you can start clearing out everything else with like your 7-minute practice and your longer practices and a deeper understanding of who you are. Like breath is the access point to our healing and our consciousness. And it's not yes, it is a woo-woo thing. I'm not afraid to say that out loud, but also it is biological science as well. Because when we start to heal the nervous system, like, man, all the things that we were holding on to that broke the nervous system, they bubble up to the surface for us to take an honest look at. So we all need to take, as men, we all need to take this honest look at the ways in which we're killing ourselves, right? And it's not to shame us, but really, like, if we want to live, we have to bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind. And that's what breath is. Breath is this bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind. So we have to be willing to take an honest look at that and explore all the shadow. And maybe it won't be in this lifetime. Can that be okay too? Maybe we won't get to every single shadow we have. You know, like, that's all right. Just every day, just breathe, because then you can choose. You can keep choosing to breathe, which then multiplies for you being able to keep doing your work.
We're going to have to run this back one day in the spring or the summer to connect with you again. I really feel like we only scratched the surface here talking to you. I know this episode is going to provide a lot of value to the Building Men audience. Josh Trent, where can the Building Men podcast audience find you? How can they connect with you and do the work that you were talking about? I
mean, the most powerful place to start is this M21 guide, because in the guide we talk about really practical things for men, for women and men, but specifically, like, I'm a man, I made the guide, and it took me almost 4 months to make this thing, because I had to go back and be like, okay, out of all these shows, out of like 300 at the time, now 400 something, 50 shows, I had to really decide, well, what are the core essence? What is like the most distilled nuggets that all of these world-class people are saying and how they're being? And I put these 6 practices into the guide so that people just have a starting place. So for all the men with us and for the women that love their men, just go to wellnessforce.com/ M21. And you can get the guide. There's some breath practices in there as well. That's the best place to start.
We'll link that in the show notes. We'll link this to Instagram, all your other social media spots so the audience can find you. Anthony Meralda, any final thoughts, my friend?
Yeah, so can we do one big breath together before we close this out? Because that was one thing that I wanted, because you've done it on some other podcasts. I was like, I want to breathe with Josh Trent.
Oh.
Like, I would love if you could just sort of guide us through one of those real quick.
Okay, Anthony and Dennis, put your feet flat on the ground. Everyone with us, do the same thing. If you're standing, take a seat. If you're laying on the ground on your back, that's fine too. Put both hands on your belly, and I want you to breathe in through your nose and fill the balloon behind your hands. So just breathe in through your nose, fill a balloon behind your hands. Pause there, see if you can suck in a little more air, fill that balloon a little bit more, and then let it go with an audible exhale. And now let's do that 6 times without any pause at the top. So inhale through your nose, fill your belly, fill the balloon. Last one, rich breath. And just return to your normal breathing and just feel the gratitude for being a human being and for just being a man. We get to be fucking men. Fucking celebrate that. Celebrate being a man. Celebrate that shit. Because a lot of people don't want to celebrate that. It's up to us to celebrate that. So continue to celebrate that with your breath.
Building Men Podcast. Find us on Instagram at building.men, buildingmencoach@gmail.com. This has been a tremendous episode. I enjoyed every single minute of this. Josh Trent, thank you so much, my friend. We love you here. We definitely want to do this again. Go a step further than you thought you can go. We'll see you next time on Building Men.